teach the old man some respect."
An arrogant biker strode into a small diner and pointed straight at an 81-year-old man shouting at the top of his lungs. A peaceful morning in the town of Millbrook was torn apart in an instant right inside Roz's diner, a place long regarded as a symbol of calm and respect for veterans. He thought the man before him was just a frail old-timer, easy to bully, the perfect prey to flaunt cheap strength. But he had no idea the man was a veteran forged by iron discipline and sustained by a brotherhood that never leaves anyone behind. And in the very place he believed he could impose his will, he would pay the price for his arrogance. Meet Dawson. The story unfolds on a Tuesday morning that seemed peaceful in the small town of Millbrook, until it suddenly turned into a storm. Sergeant William Bill Dawson, now 81, simply intended to sip his usual cup of coffee in the corner of Ross's diner, where he had been a regular for many years. He did not expect that very moment would pull the whole community into an unexpected trial, when a hulking man in a leather jacket brimming with swagger suddenly chose him as a target. In a heartbeat, the notion of letting the past lie quietly vanished, and the lesson never leave a brother behind rang louder than ever. Bill Dawson, his frame marked by time, still held the unruffled bearing of a lifelong soldier. The thin hands mapped with scars from 3 tours in Vietnam, and his eyes tempered by years still shone with the patience of a man who had witnessed both the best and the worst of humanity. An unprovoked attack on an elderly veteran was not merely violence. It was the beginning of a disciplined, military-minded response. Roz's Diner, a chrome and vinyl spot on the corner of Millbrook's main street, had served the community for nearly 40 years. Here, with rows of red booths, black and white checkerboard tile, and the rich smell of coffee from 5 in the morning, the place was a symbol of peace. Team photos from the high school community events and a small wall honoring hometown heroes who served hung proudly. In that friendly atmosphere, disputes rarely rose above a few sharp words, and respect for elders and veterans was almost an unwritten law. But that morning, the familiar scene was ripped open by senseless aggression, forcing the community to reevaluate its courage and loyalty. Bill enlisted at 18, carrying the ideal of service to country his Depression-era parents had instilled. 3 tours in Vietnam, from the tangled canals of the Mekong Delta to the chaotic streets of Saigon, forged him into a steadfast soldier, earning him 2 Purple Hearts, a Bronze Star, and the absolute respect of his comrades. Back in Millbrook, he married his high school sweetheart, built a family with 3 children, and devoted his life to the local hardware and supply store. He spoke little of war, letting actions speak in his place. People knew him as the reliable neighbor, the devoted husband, a man whose handshake carried more weight than any promise. Bill's greatest pride was his eldest son, Michael, who also joined the military, but followed a path through logistics and command, now a colonel. Every conversation between father and son blended family affection with the bond of service. 2 soldiers, 2 generations understanding the weight of responsibility. To keep his daily rhythm, Bill still came to Roz's Diner each morning, settled into his familiar corner, read the paper, sipped coffee, and greeted familiar faces. The army cap he wore was not for show, but a private reminder of discipline and of the brothers who forever remained on the battlefield. When the biker walked in that morning, the air changed immediately. His massive frame, swaggering gait, and threatening eyes made people flinch. To Bill, he embodied everything he had fought all his life: pointless violence, disregard for others, and the warped belief that the strong rule the weak. When the biker's gaze fixed on the corner where Bill sat upright with a soldier's posture, a predatory instinct seemed to wake in him. Perhaps it was that quiet composure, that steady confidence, something found only in those who have faced real enemies, that made him choose Bill. And it was the greatest mistake of his life. The biker blocked the way, his voice booming across a diner that had fallen silent. "Hey, old man, I want that chair." Bill Dawson looked up from the paper, his eyes calm but alert. He had faced enemies in Vietnam's rice fields, survived firefights in Saigon streets. A small-town bully could not shake him. But Bill also knew violence escalates quickly, And an old soldier understands de-escalation is often the wiser path. The biker, however, mistook calm for weakness, and he was about to learn the difference between a man who chooses not to fight and one who cannot fight. Bill folded the newspaper neatly, each motion slow and deliberate. "There are plenty of open tables, son," he said lightly, but with the weight of a man accustomed to command. "No need to cause trouble." "Trouble?" The man scoffed, the sharp laugh making the waitress behind the counter fumble. "Old man, you don't know what trouble is. I told you I'm taking that chair." Bill studied his face, reading familiar signs, the hard glare, the tensed frame, the posture of someone hunting for a reason to start a fight, not just a seat. Years in combat had taught Bill the difference between someone you could talk to and someone who had already chosen his fists. "I've been sitting here for 20 years, he replied, still calm, taking another sip of coffee. "But if you really need this spot, I can—" The slap came without warning. A brutal swing knocked the army cap from Bill's head and sent his coffee crashing to the floor, shattering. The sound cracked like a gunshot, freezing the diner. Every gaze went rigid. An elderly veteran struck in the very community he had protected. Bill bent to pick up his cap coffee soaking his sleeve. He stood, straightened his shirt, and in those deep eyes the math of tactics began to run. At 81, the hands that once knew knives and rifles still remembered how to end a fight quickly. But Bill did not need violence. He now had a stronger weapon, brothers, he had never left behind. "Excuse me, miss," he said evenly to the waitress, a red mark rising on his cheek. "May I borrow the phone for a moment?" The waitress, trembling, nodded toward the pay phone near the restroom. Bill walked slowly, ignoring the jeers behind him. Teach the old man what respect means. The call was brief, coded in words only military people would recognize. "Michael, it's Dad. I'm at Roz's on Main Street. A civilian just assaulted me. Need support." At Fort Campbell, Kentucky, Colonel Michael Dawson was reviewing deployment schedules when the phone rang. His father's voice was steady but carried an urgent signal. It took only seconds for him to understand this was not simple family business. This was an attack on a veteran, and the military never looks away from that. Immediately, the office turned into a military beehive. Michael told his aide to call the motor pool while he gathered his most trusted officers and NCOs. Orders moved crisply, succinctly. Within minutes, 4 Humvees rolled out the gate in formation, carrying the focused faces of soldiers who knew they were heading out to protect one of the old lions. In less than 25 minutes, military tires were rolling toward Millbrook. It was a rapid, precise response, not only for the honor of one family, but for an unbreakable oath: no one left behind. Meanwhile, at Roz's diner, Bill had returned to his familiar seat by the window. He sat straight-backed, adjusted his worn cap, his eyes revealing nothing but calm. The swelling on his cheek only sharpened his resolve. The biker continued to strut and boast before unwilling spectators, unaware that every word and every smug second brought a column of soldiers closer, ready to redefine loyalty and real strength. "What kind of soldier doesn't stand up for himself, old man? What kind of soldier were you?" the biker spat, mocking and challenging. Bill quietly sipped a fresh cup of coffee set down by the waitress Jenny without him asking. He sat patient, waiting for what he knew would come. The biker thought he had won, but he had no idea that this moment of pride would spark the worst nightmare of his life. Bill's calm silence only emboldened the bully. He started bragging, boasting about times he had taught lessons to old folks who didn't show respect, turning the diner into a stage for cheap theatrics. Regulars sat quiet, some anxious, some glancing at the door, afraid they might be next. Bill peeked at his watch now and then, every motion precise, the rhythm of someone trained to coordinate under pressure. That steady patience angered the biker. He wanted fear, or panicked defiance, not the unblinking gaze of a veteran. If this story moves you, please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps the right voices be heard and understood. Time dragged. The biker's heavy footsteps thudded across the checkerboard floor, each loop ratcheting the tension. Jenny gathered her courage and approached, voice shaky but firm. "Could you, please, take another table? Mr. Dawson has sat here for more than 20 years. The biker growled. "I don't care how long he sat here. This is about respect." And the old man just learned his lesson. Jenny backed away, eyes flicking to Bill, the only still point in the storm. To flaunt his power, the biker slid into the seat across from Bill, spreading his arms across the backrest, claiming the space. "See that easy, old man? Sometimes you just need to know your place." The remaining guests started to drift out and the air grew tighter. Frank, the manager, stood frozen behind the counter, torn between calling the police and fearing it would blow up the situation. The biker grew drunk on his power. He declared, "This is how things should be. Respect the strong and no one gets hurt." But outside, a low rumble began to seep through the chrome walls, the heavy, even synchronized thrum of engines. Bill took another sip, his face composed, with only a slight tightening around the eyes, the look of a soldier who knows the sound of reinforcements drawing near. While the biker was still lecturing about respect and consequences, he did not realize he was only minutes away from losing everything. He did not understand that 22 minutes of arrogance would end in a heartbeat when true strength revealed itself, not to feed ego, but to protect and preserve honor. Then the crisis became a mirror. Bill, with calm and discipline, showed why he had once led in battle, always finding the path to the best outcome with the least harm. Jenny, though afraid, chose to stand on the right side. Frank, in his moment of hesitation, had to face his real responsibility. And the biker. He revealed his cowardice, choosing targets who were old and weak, never having paid the price for his bravado. As the clock edged toward the 20th minute since the call, the air inside Roz's diner shifted. Something was coming. An invisible pressure threaded through the window panes. People held their breath. Bill gave a slight nod, certainty in his eyes. "They're here." Diesel engines thundered louder and closer with every beat. Customers by the window turned from their plates, realizing quiet Main Street was no longer ordinary. Bill's posture changed just a hair, but to a veteran it was clear the relaxed wait had become readiness, like the moment before giving an order to advance. The biker, drunk on his strength, missed every signal. Jenny met Bill's eyes. In them there was no fear, only expectation. Raised in a military town, she knew the look a soldier certain his brothers were on the way. The rest of the diners fell silent, sensing a turning point. The room thickened the biker's hollow monologue, mixing with a distant growl of engines. Then it happened. 4 military Humvees appeared moving in perfect formation, stopping right in front of Roz's diner. The small street turned into a scene from a controlled operation. Soldiers stepped down decisively, no bulky armor, but their stance eyes and cadence said enough. These were seasoned warriors responding for a good reason. From the lead vehicle stepped Colonel Michael Dawson. His uniform was razor sharp, his gaze held the authority of a commander and the concern of a son. This was no longer just duty. This was a soldier answering for his father. As the troops took positions around the diner, the biker's bravado cracked. "Whoa, what is this?" he stammered, his voice shaking, all swagger gone. Bill remained seated, pride kindling in his eyes as his son approached. Faces pressed to the windows, the town realized the man assaulted was not an anonymous veteran. He was a link in a chain of honor where brotherhood and family bind into unbreakable strength. Michael entered with the step of a commander used to bringing order to chaos. His eyes swept over the bruise on his father's cheek and the coffee stains on his shirt, as if checking for injuries. "Dad," he said, voice low, carrying yet tight with restrained anger. "Are you all right?" Bill answered evenly. "I'm fine. But this gentleman here seems to think hitting an elderly veteran comes without consequences." The biker's face drained. He backed away, stammering, "No, it's nothing. Just a misunderstanding. Me and the old man just arguing over a seat." Michael turned, the warmth in his expression shifting to professional cold. "You assaulted a veteran who served 3 tours, earned 2 Purple Hearts, and helped safeguard the freedom you enjoy. That's not a misunderstanding. That's a federal crime." Federal?" It was just a slap. "He's fine," the man babbled. Michael's voice went colder. "He is my father, and you are about to learn what happens when you lay hands on the family of an active duty officer." The room tightened to a wire. The biker had three options: run, surrender, or lash out. He chose wrong. He clenched his fists and growled, "You don't scare me. This is America, not your little military camp outside." The soldiers shifted formation at once. Hands poised near weapons, eyes locked, movements crisp as a battle drill. The air threatened to spark. Before it did, Bill broke the standoff. He stood slowly. He rose with the quiet authority that had defined his life. His voice carried low and sure, not to the soldiers, but straight to the biker's son. Bill said, a battlefield gravity in his tone, "You've made enough mistakes today. Don't make it worse." The words were simple, not shouted, yet they cut the tension like a blade. In that moment, the biker was not facing an old man, but two generations of soldiers, father and son men, who earned respect not with fists or threats, but with a lifetime of service. Colonel Michael Dawson nodded once. The soldiers held their tactical positions, covering every exit, but did not overstep. His voice was professionally cold. "You have 30 seconds to sit down and wait for the local police, or we will help you do it." This was the deciding beat. The biker's bravado fell away as the cost became real. His shoulders sagged and he collapsed into the booth, panic washing his face as a man who'd cornered himself. Michael moved with purpose, angling to watch his father while controlling the threat. Years of training showed in every motion. Outside, the soldiers stood steady, disciplined, and calm, a reminder that real strength is not reckless force, but restraint and control. Frank, Michael called without taking his eyes off the situation. "Please call the local police. We have a citizen's arrest." The manager nodded rapidly and lifted the phone behind the counter. Inside, everyone sat hushed, realizing they had just witnessed something far beyond a petty clash. This was not merely the end of a bully. It was a living lesson in brotherhood, in how soldiers protect one another across generations. Bill sat back down steady as a rock cheek still marked, but eyes bright. He did not need revenge. What he wanted was justice, to prove that actions carry consequences. The biker, making one last plea, blurted, "Come on, this is ridiculous. It was just a slap. People argue all the time. You're turning this into World War II. Michael replied, voice level and firm, "You assaulted an elderly veteran. In many places, that's considered a hate crime with enhanced penalties, and you did it in front of multiple witnesses and on camera." He pointed to the corner where a red light blinked, silent, undeniable proof. The biker's face blanched as he realized every angle had captured what he'd done. "The footage will show my father tried to de-escalate, even offered to give up the seat," Michael continued. "You attacked him without cause, and he made no threatening moves." The words landed like nails in a coffin, transforming the loud bully into a defendant with nowhere to go. The door swung open. Sheriff Tom Bradley walked in, a veteran of Operation Desert Storm. His eyes took in the room with the insight of a man who understood both military discipline and civil law. "Colonel Dawson," he nodded with respect, then turned to Bill. "Sergeant Dawson, I hear you had some trouble this morning." The sight of rank titles and the way people addressed them filled the diner with respect, a stark contrast to the biker's earlier insolence. It also made one thing clear: no matter where or when they served, veterans belonged to a single network, bound by loyalty and sacrifice. The biker made a last attempt, appealing to Sheriff Bradley, hoping to sway him. "Sheriff, this has gone too far. I just asked the old guy to move and a whole army shows up. This is America, not some military dictatorship." Bradley's gaze hardened. He looked straight at the man, trying to play the victim. "Sir," he said, voice low but unyielding, "from what I can see, you assaulted an 81-year-old veteran. That is not asking him to move. That is a crime." The biker flushed, voice cracking with desperation. "It was just a slap. He's fine. You're only doing this because he has connections." But that very line buried his hope. The room changed. People recognized the root of his disrespect, not only toward Bill, but toward the values of the whole community. Sheriff Bradley stepped forward, authority and justice firm in his tone. The camera recorded everything. It shows Sergeant Dawson trying to calm things down, even offering his seat, and you striking him without warning. It also shows he made no threats and offered no resistance. That is evidence that cannot be denied. The biker tried weakly. I didn't know he was a soldier. Colonel Michael Dawson cut in voice like a blade. And if you had known that he deserved more respect, that you shouldn't hit the elderly, do you need rank to understand what's obvious? The diner fell silent. Then Bill spoke, his voice warm and steady. The voice of a man who had lived through 8 decades through war and peace. Son, it doesn't matter whether I served or how old I am. What you did was wrong, and you knew it was wrong the moment you started. The simple truth ended all excuses. The cold click of handcuffs closed the scene. The bully was no longer the intimidator. He was the accused, facing charges of assaulting an elderly person, attacking a veteran, and disturbing the peace. But the real victory was not the list of charges. It came in the moment after. A young boy sitting with his grandmother in the corner edged forward, eyes wide with admiration. "Mister, were you really a soldier?" The boy asked, his voice small but steady. Bill smiled, the first true smile of that tense morning. "Yes, kiddo. A long time ago, but yes." The boy lifted his chin, squared his shoulders, and gave a clumsy salute. Bill returned it with a crisp, formal one, and the diner erupted into applause. The contrast was beautiful. Where the biker had spread contempt and violence, a child brought respect and honor. After that day, Roz's Diner was no longer just the usual local spot. It became a gathering place for veterans and their families, a living symbol that true strength does not come from fear, but from unity, dignity, and the promise to never leave anyone behind. The table where Bill had sat that morning was quietly reserved for veterans. A small plaque was mounted honoring all who served. It became a symbol not just for Bill, but for every generation that ever wore the uniform. The biker pled out sentenced to community service at the local VA hospital, where he saw firsthand the pain and sacrifice of the old men he had once mocked. But the real change did not lie in the sentence. It began with the community. The Roz's Diner story sparked a wider conversation about respecting veterans and standing up to wrongdoing. Many shops posted veteran-friendly. Millbrook's town council passed a resolution naming it an honor community, pledging support and gratitude to those who served. Bill suddenly found himself a public figure, but he remained humble. He used the attention to speak at schools, churches, and community events about the values he believed in: service, respect, and civic responsibility. Colonel Michael Dawson received praise from his superiors for measured leadership, not only protecting his father, but embodying the core values of the military, protecting one another even outside the uniform. The story spread beyond Millbrook, across state lines, through social media and veteran groups. In military forums, the phrase 22 minutes became a quiet rallying cry, a reminder of how quickly the military community responds when one of their own needs help. From that moment, initiatives supporting veterans sprang up across America. In Millbrook itself, a mentoring program took shape, pairing older veterans with younger service members, ensuring hard-won lessons would not be lost, but passed on to the leaders of tomorrow. Roz's Diner became a destination not just for locals, but for military families from elsewhere, who came to sit at the veterans' table and hear the story retold. Frank, the manager, expanded the display wall with more photos and memories from local veterans across eras, turning the little diner into a living memory hall. Even the local police changed. Sheriff Bradley added procedures for handling situations involving veterans, making sure every officer understood the legal protections for seniors and those who served. For Bill, the experience brought new purpose in old age. He became a strong voice for veterans' rights, a bridge between the civilian world and the military one. He and his son Michael worked together on advocacy projects, deepening their bond with a shared mission of service. The story was never just a diner dispute. It was proof that respect does not spring from violence or threats, but from character service and the courage to stand on the side of what is right. The bonds forged in uniform never break. They rise above rank, age, and time to ensure no veteran stands alone. In a small diner, one arrogant line lit the fuse for an underground wave. But in the end, what remained was not the slap or the shouting. It was the stark contrast, empty pride on one side, dignity tempered by discipline and sacrifice on the other. People saw clearly that real strength is not muscle or menace, but resolve, solidarity, and respect for human worth. Bill Dawson did not need his fists to prevail. He had what the other man never would: honor, comrades, and the trust of an entire community. While the bully thought he held power, the old soldier proved that real power lies in how we live and in the values we protect to the end. And that lesson is not only for one morning in Millbrook, but for all of us. What about you? If one day you saw an arrogance trampling justice, would you stay silent or stand up for what is right? Share your thoughts below. And do not forget to like, subscribe, and share this video so we can keep bringing more stories that inspire and uplift.